Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the MC Squared podcast. I'm Andrew McNeil, and joined as always with my co-host, Jimmy McKenna.
Let's go.
I got a fire in me, you're gonna set to burn. We got a world to see.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. We have a very interesting show for you today. We're going to discuss some of the important and crazy things going on in the world and give you some of our perspective, maybe some biblical perspective. Hopefully you're going to find some truth, some foundational things that maybe you can apply later on. And, we love to talk about our opinions. I think that's important. I think it's fun. But all of us really are looking for something a little higher than just man's opinion. We want something that's solid. So hopefully we'll bring some of that into it. We don't know. But in the meantime, from the last time we met, Jimmy, the world has practically blown up.
It has.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Mill Dam?
Well, no, I'm not talking about Mill Dam, but actually,
You're talking about Mill Dam.
Now that you mentioned that, it might be good to bring that in. It's a great segue there.
Yes.
Since, not to knock Vigo County, but apparently we're very good at tearing things down here, especially if it's historical.
It came down. It was also dangerous.
Yes. How many people had died from it?
I don't know. Few, couple, 3. I don't know.
Were they drunk?
No, I remember a few years ago a kid died.
Oh,
It was
terrible.
kind of a bad deal. It was when the creek was real high.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so since our last episode, they have taken down Mill Dam, the historic Mill Dam, and it's kind of neat. My son and my dad were able to go there that day.
Oh, really? They
and
watched it?
the initial. It was kind of cool. I watched it too. I think they were showing it on Terra Scanner or something like that. Yeah.
Yes.
It seemed like the initial few grabs by the large implement was having trouble. It was like, this dam is a little tougher than I thought it was. And then they just started like jackhammering it.
Yeah.
But interesting, a lot of water came through and then took the family down a few days later and looked at it. It ends up that it wasn't really as deep as we thought it was going to be.
No, it's
at the
very
dam.
shallow.
Yeah, very shallow, a lot of sand.
Yeah.
And so they've done a lot of rearranging now, and that area pulled out a lot of old timber and whatnot. So I'll give a positive thing and a little negative thing. A positive thing is my son's already been fishing downstream and caught a bunch of fish.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if it has anything to do with it, but hey, it didn't kill all the fish
That's
in the
right.
creek, so
It's
thank
good.
goodness.
Yeah.
And then it was pretty far downstream. But then it's kind of sad to see the amount of water. I mean, it's granted we're drought-ish type weather right now. It's a
Right.
trickle
Right.
coming down through there.
Right.
It were to hold this massive water before. It's a trickle coming through now. But I'm really interested to see what happens in the spring when the water comes up. They're packing up some sand. They're using the heavy equipment to kind of press it down. But I don't know. All in all, I guess it's not a terrible thing.
Well, one of the things I thought was pretty wild is, did you see all of the wooden timbers that
Yes.
they built? They originally built that with wooden timbers
Yeah.
and handmade metal spikes, I think were some of that was incredible. And the fact that, was it 200 years old?
Oh, yeah.
It would have been there for another 200 years.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't going anywhere
No,
if we hadn't torn it down.
It was super solid. The concrete work was super solid. So I don't think that they make stuff like that anymore.
No,
So
I don't think so.
They are going to do something with the timbers, I think, right?
Yeah.
They're donating them to the
Well, they were
North Bonfire.
They were going to make park benches out of them. I saw some comments that, there's always somebody wisecracking about getting splinters in your rear end or something. And suing. I just immediately the minute the comments made of maybe we'll donate these to make park benches or something. But anyway, it was kind of sad to see it happen. It's an interesting and kind of a dark area. Honestly, I've always thought it was like kind of lots of trees, and it's just kind of dark and old, and that whole area is not like Deming where you can just like
Yeah.
family friendly and people show up.
Yeah.
It was always, I'm not going to say it's sketchy, but it was always a little sketchy there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I kind of know what you're talking about. I think it was a
I mean,
little,
the day after they had pieces being stolen left and right of what was left over.
That's kind of ridiculous. I mean, what are these people going to do, honestly, with that stuff? It's going to go and sit in their yard with all the rest of the implements in their yard.
Right.
But, yeah, I think it, I've always kind of thought of it, especially the area up above it, a little bit dark. Maybe even
Yeah.
spiritually dark.
Yeah,
And maybe it's from the
strange.
people losing their lives in that
It's
area. I don't know.
strange. Yeah.
I mean, below the dam, I always felt, well, I never really spent a lot of time above it.
Yeah.
Just
I feel like regardless, it's probably a positive thing. It's just a weird. We talked about this earlier in the earlier podcast. If you want to go back and look, and I don't even know which number that podcast was. It was pretty early on in our podcast. We talked about the Mill Dam. But it's very interesting how all of a sudden it became a high priority. Like you said, somebody died, and it was dangerous, but there was no conversation for years, and then all of a sudden it was this high priority. Turns out it was attached to some taxpayer dollars that were being granted to do it. So that's fine. Didn't cost anybody here anything. So whatever. I think we can put that
and
to rest,
it was
right?
definitely not. It was probably better to do it now that the commissioners weren't up for re-election in the fall. I'll just throw that out.
Well,
because
the deal with that is, yes, and the deal with that is
it would not have been good in an election year.
some folks are angry, and I don't know any of these people, but some people are really angry. That anger isn't going to carry for
No.
longer than a couple of weeks. I mean, it's just not. It's not that. And I hope it's good for the creek. I agree. When I saw the pictures, it just was. It looked like it all went away.
I know.
Originally, it just looked like it was gone. I agree. So, but we're in a dry time, so it'll come back. It'll be good. All right, so.
So that was what you were talking about blowing the world
Well, not
up.
exactly.
Okay.
No, not exactly. So, I believe it was October the 7th. So I don't know if that was. I feel like that was that a Saturday morning?
It was Shabbat, so it
Yeah,
was
and it was the last day of the Feast of Tabernacles in Israel, and it was a high holy day for them. So there were whole segments of the Jewish population that were away from phones, away from television, away from media. It was a rest day, so they were all resting, and it was a really important day for them. And obviously, we're not saying anything that everybody who's hearing this doesn't already know. They had a massive terrorist attack, and at this point, they estimate that over 2,900 Hamas terrorists poured over that border that morning. And in the early morning hours, they slaughtered, in the most heinous way possible, innocent civilians, men, women, and children, and innocent babies. Not to go into the details because they're heartbreaking, they're disgusting, and they're maddening. But it was the worst terrorist attack in the short history of the nation of Israel since 1948. It's the worst terrorist attack that the Jews had occurred. Really, the worst event probably since the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And they estimate at this point, I think they have had 1,000 casualties of civilians. 200 to 400 people kidnapped, probably being tortured. So it's just an absolutely mind-boggling, awful thing that took place. And immediately, Jimmy, I don't know if you're on social media a whole lot, but I am on Twitter. And so I follow a lot of stuff. I really like Twitter now, especially since Elon took over. It has freed up independent media. So independent folks on the ground, trusted journalists, these folks can get their message out without being censored. And we know now, because of Elon, that behind the scenes, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, they were all coordinating with DHS and the U.S. government for what could and could not be said on social media. So that's just a side. That's why I'm on Twitter. I really like it. You're able to see a lot of things. So it is crazy, even from the church's point of view, the opinions and the attitudes towards the Jewish people as a whole, and also towards Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, if you will. And it goes all over the place. It goes from fully supporting Israel to fully supporting the Palestinians. I mean, it's just a crazy thing, and there seems to be so many variations even in the church of what is our actual attitude towards the Jewish people? What is it supposed to be? And so I'd like to for us to discuss that a little bit tonight. In fact, that may be the main theme of the podcast, because there's so much there. I don't want to bore people. I don't want to get into to the weeds, but there's some basic concepts that I believe, based on Scripture and experience and some of that. And obviously, I'm not saying that I'm all right. I don't feel comfortable with that, because there is so many different opinions on this. Yeah. Certainly there can be, room for us to disagree and stuff. So, so I would like to get started with that at some point, but let's kind of switch gears and finish one more thing that's blowing up right now. And even as we speak right now, it's going into its third round of voting, I believe, for the Speaker of the House.
Okay.
So right before the terrorist attack, Matt Gaetz in the House of Representatives, and I'm not going to waste a ton of time with this, but basically Kevin McCarthy went 15 rounds of voting in order to become the Speaker of the House. He made tons of concessions to the conservatives, of which I am one. I'm not in the House, but I would consider myself a conservative. I think you would too. Yeah. So he made tons of concessions. Among those were the full release of the January 6th videos, public release of all the January 6th videos. I believe it was no more continuing resolutions. They were going to get a balanced budget. There were lots of things, but one of them was also that one person among the caucus or among the House could put forth a motion to vacate the chair. And what a lot of folks don't realize is that has been the tradition of the House of Representatives. I keep wanting to say the Indiana House. That's terrible. The House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., that has been the tradition from the beginning for 100 and some years. Nancy Pelosi changed that to where it had to be a majority that would vote to vacate the chair. So all that the 20, as they were called, the 20 conservatives that forced this 15 rounds with Kevin McCarthy, and frankly, I didn't want Kevin McCarthy, but nobody else was standing up to take the place, so I didn't think there was probably going to be a whole lot of other option. Anyway, long story short, Kevin breaks all these promises. He breaks every single one of them. I mean, and ultimately, you had moderates voting this time around to vacate him because he lied. They didn't even agree with the conservatives, but they're like, how can I trust the Speaker of the House if it's a continual, to my face he says one thing, or behind closed doors he says one thing, and then we come out and it's never true. So he didn't release the January 6th. He was slow walking the impeachment of Joe Biden and Merrick Garland and DHS secretary, who's horrific with the border enforcement. We have a complete overrun at the border right now. People have no idea how bad our border is. And that's directly the result of not only Joe Biden, but DHS head Mayorkas is his last name. I can't remember. He's a piece of work. But so anyway, that you would have thought that the Matt Gaetz had just committed the greatest terrorist act in the world, the way the Republicans were screaming about what he did. So anyway, so that's where we're at. We're fighting, and it's in an interesting place because Jim Jordan has now emerged as the consensus candidate. But once again, we have 20 congressmen who won't sign on to him because they're mad that they got rid of Kevin McCarthy. They're mad. And what's interesting about this whole thing is it's not about policy necessarily. It's not about conservative versus liberal or conservative versus moderate. It is about Ukraine funding, all of it. It is absolutely. Jim Jordan has promised that no more funding for Ukraine. And that's part of the reason. So, and Kevin McCarthy was keeping that door open. Steve Scalise was going to keep that door open. The guy that's in there as a interim right now, Patrick McHenry, which is his great name. They want to keep that going. If you see the ones that are fighting against Jim Jordan becoming the Speaker of the House, they all have deep ties to the Defense Department. The defense contractors who are going to who receive the money that goes into the Ukraine. So this is one giant money laundering scheme. Yes. Ukraine has become just this massive money pit where we throw billions of dollars in it, and it comes back to our politicians and to the defense industry. So it's totally corrupt, and so tie Israel in with this a little bit. Folks have criticized the administration and even some of these war hawks jumping on to, let's go support Israel, which I agree with, but let's throw troops at it. Let's throw military at it. And you got to question their motives to a certain extent, because you're like, okay, are you really supporting Israel, or are you just looking for another war to keep the money flowing? Because that's all these guys are about. So anyway, that's the real fight. That's what's going on right now. And it's really, really encouraging, because if Jim Jordan pulls this off, it is going to be one of the biggest coups of the MAGA Republicans. The grassroots of America is starting to fight back and is winning some very big victories right now. Yeah. So Kevin McCarthy having to make all those concessions was a huge victory. The fact that we got rid of him was a huge victory. The fact that now 90% of the Republicans have signed on to Jim Jordan, who is a rock-solid conservative. This guy is going to be great. And the establishment is screaming bloody murder. It's a great thing. It's a great thing for America. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, it's kind of taken a back seat to all this stuff. And so that's
It has. It has a part to play.
Yeah.
Because we're unable to do certain things funding-wise. We're unable to do certain things directional-wise with all the stuff that's going on if we don't have the Speaker of the House, and they're not able to do the people's business, basically, in the House.
Yeah. So I haven't been staying too much up on that. I do like Jim Jordan. For sure. I like Jim Jordan. But I've really felt like the whole Ukraine thing has been something that's been continued by politicians.
Yeah.
And it just seems like there's just way too much buy-in to it.
Well,
there's way too much buy-in. And now with them reacting on possibly decreasing funding, I mean, so I think that they're playing off the American people, because they'll just jump on and say, why would you defund that?
Right.
While on the backside they're getting.
Oh, yeah. They're all getting kickbacks.
Oh,
and it's incredible. Now, they wouldn't see it as kickbacks, but so you've got a defense contractor in your district, or who's a lobbyist, who's got a good connection with you. Doesn't matter. They write huge checks to your campaign. These are the guys getting the money from the Ukraine or from the weapons we send over there. They got to make more in the U.S. government. I mean, it's something we've kind of known about. I mean, but Ukraine is such a corrupt country, and the war was such a useless and worthless war.
Yes,
one that shouldn't have ever happened. Instigated by the weakness and arrogance of Joe Biden, who was also deeply, with his son Hunter, deeply embedded in corruption with Burisma and all that was going on there in Ukraine. It's just astounding, the corruption. So,
Yep.
Yeah. So we're gonna be right back with a few comments, I think, about Israel. So.
That's right. So we're back, and we're going to talk about Israel a little bit and the recent stuff been going on over there. Give a little bit of background. I don't usually watch a whole lot of news, but I got super hyper involved on Saturday night and just started watching like everything.
Yeah.
Which is probably too much for me and my. I purposely stay away from a lot of things, but I saw some interesting. I started watching news, and obviously I stayed away from most of the mainstream and started going deeper into the YouTube world of Israeli news and looking at actual reports out of Israel. And I saw one that was really interesting, and they have these female fighters there, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But they, one of these female fighters, she used to work at the border where they came through that border and they just ransacked that music festival, which is odd. They're having a music festival during a time of Shabbat, but whatever, come to America. We do it all the time. So, but she had said that when she had worked at that border, there's no reason that should have ever happened. That would have never happened. So immediately, and I remember the first couple of reports that came out, I don't want to be super conspiracy theorist, but the first couple of reports that came out, it said that this is something that got by Israel's and America's intelligence. I'm like, okay, Israel and America's intelligence, interesting. Okay, so, and, and unfortunately my distrust in our current leadership, and especially those who are overseas that are quote unquote representing us over there, whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
I just don't trust that we weren't fully
aware this was going to happen.
Yeah. And I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist about it, but I remember initially watching that and then I thought, oh my goodness, because I have always I remember showing 6 months ago, showing pictures and videos of the Iron Dome to my kids because how cool it is.
Yes.
Right. And they have this Iron Dome and it takes down these things and they're just impenetrable. And, they have all this stuff set up and they live their lives to like they're going to be killed the next day because they can be.
Right.
And that's why I think it was really interesting to see the videos that were taken by the Palestinians when they were just coming through and it didn't seem like there was anybody there.
Right.
And I just don't, I never thought of an Israel like that. I thought of an Israel who was always, they could mobilize every citizen because
right.
every citizen has to be trained.
Right.
And so I just thought that was just a really interesting thing when they had come through. Another thing, so I've kind of detached myself after I probably had high blood pressure for a couple of days. But one of the things that kind of drives me a little bit crazy is the Christians out there who are excited about this. And you know why? They're excited because this is the big one and the rapture's coming.
Oh, okay.
And I'll tell you what, Andrew, it makes me sick. It makes me sick because I feel like they're weak. I feel like I know that's not the reason that we're here to sit around, sit on our hands, to love Jesus and get raptured the heck out. Right. No, we were put here for a different reason. Yeah. But there's some Christians out there that are like, okay, we see this. This is going to be it. This is going to be it. Let's just hunker down and let's be ready to be raptured out of here. And it makes me sick, man. It really does. And I think people get some people get excited about this stuff.
Yeah.
Because this is what we see in Revelations, and we're ready to go, and it's all ready to go. I'm sorry. I don't think I know that's not the reason we're here. We're here to actually change the environment by being in it, change the world by being in it, by people that have Christ inside of them.
Yeah.
I mean, does it seem weak to you that there's people that just want raptured out and go to heaven? I mean, it'd be great someday to go to heaven. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm also saying that, man, I want to see it change here first.
Right. Well, I definitely agree with you. I mean, obviously, I believe in the rapture, but that's kind of a side subject. But what a calloused and heartless view from the Jews' perspective. They've just had a horrific, torturous slaughter on their land. And I mean, if they even thought there were Christians or anybody besides Hamas and the folks that were sympathetic to the Palestinians rejoicing in what has happened, that, hey, this means we're going to get out of here. I mean, that's odd. That's kind of an odd thing, but it's not that surprising to me. Have you ever been to Israel?
No, it's kind of like Allison and my dream trip.
Oh yeah,
but
so I have been. It's been a while ago. It's been well over 10 years ago. My wife also went on a separate trip a year or two after I did. So it is interesting, and it is very important, I think, for American Christians to go to Israel, to actually be on the ground, experience it, meet the Israelis, meet just the everyday folks that are there, walk the streets and see the different things that are going on. But I want to share real quick, and I don't want to get into it too long because you can talk about this till you're blue in the face.
Yeah.
But I want to give what I believe theologically or biblically is the right perspective on the Jewish people. I have heard, and it's called replacement theology, I have heard that, hey, we're now the chosen people. All the promises of God that are in the Bible that have not been fulfilled yet, those have only to do with the church, not the Jewish people. Israel is no different. Jewish people are no different than any other lost person. And so we want them to get saved, but they're just kind of nothing, and we are everything. The church is everything. Now, if you want a biblical reference to look up on your own time, I believe it is in Romans chapter 9, 10, and 11, and especially 11, where Paul, who was a Jew, talks about the dynamics. And actually, I was reading it again this evening before I came here, just to kind of get immersed in it, because I feel like it is the proper perspective biblically of what has happened. So Paul says this. He says basically Abraham was promised descendants as many as the sand of the seashore. Yep. Okay, and again, I'm paraphrasing here.
It was right on though.
I'm grabbing what Paul said, and I'm paraphrasing. So give me some liberty here.
This is the King Andrew version.
Exactly. Yeah, Prince Andrew or something like that. Yeah, not a king. Yeah. Anyway, so Abraham and the promises and the covenant that God had with Abraham for his descendants. And actually, Paul says, and not just Abraham, not just physically Abraham, but more Isaac, because he said Isaac is the one of promise, and through Abraham's faith, which is kind of a picture of the Christians. It's kind of pictures of us, but he says that there's this tree, and it's got all these branches on it, and he said the branches on it, he says, are the Jewish people who've come to know Jesus. He said some of them have been taken out because they rejected the Lord, and God blinded their eyes. Mm-hmm. And God did that for one reason only, to allow the Gentiles, which is what me and you are, the Gentiles to be grafted in. We're wild olive trees, he says. Mm-hmm. And we're grafted into this native olive tree. And so that's great, he said. So spiritually, you are a partaker of all of the root. But he said, you are not the root. You're a partaker of it. So therefore, be humble, be grateful, and be fearful. Yeah. And he said, and this is something I never had seen before, he called the elect, because we've seen the elect used, this word elect used in the Bible a lot. And I've always thought it was Christians. And I know there are a lot of pastors going to be screaming right now if they hear this, but because they believe we are the elect. We're the elect. That's not what Paul says. He says the elect are those of the Jewish nation that came to Christ. Mm-hmm. They're the elect. We're the Gentiles. Mm-hmm. We're always the Gentiles. That's who we are.
Yes.
We're still loved and sons and daughters of the Lord. If we come to Jesus, we accept him. We are grafted into that tree. We have eternal life. We have an inheritance with God. It's fantastic. But the elect specifically were the Jewish people who had not rejected Christ, who came in. So what a lot of folks don't realize is Jesus is Jewish, is Jewish. Mm-hmm. The blood that flows through is Jewish. It was a Jewish mother. It was his physical parent. Mm-hmm. All of his disciples were Jewish. All of the converts of the early church were Jewish. It was a Jewish movement. Mm-hmm. We were granted in, and Paul says this. He says, it is riches for the world, the fact that they rejected Christ. He said, can you imagine what it's going to be when they come back to the Lord? And they will. He said, when the time of the Gentiles has finished, then all of Israel will be saved, and they will come to the Lord. And he said, you've been grafted in, even maybe for the reason that to make them jealous to come back, because he said the promises are Israel's. The covenants are Israel's. The law is Israel's. The works of God are Israel's. So it kind of puts to rest the whole, really kind of an anti-Semitic. And here's the sad truth, Jimmy. This, if you want to do a deep dive into history, the church, the Catholic Church, even the early Protestant church with Martin Luther, terrible, embarrassing, horrendous sin against the Jewish people. We have done some terrible things. During the Crusades, they rounded up the Jews and burned them alive in a building, singing a hymn around as they marched around them. This was the soldiers of the Crusades. We have done just absolutely awful. Some of the Martin Luther stuff that he began to say, he said they were pigs, they were terrible things, and Hitler literally used his words to justify. Now, I'm not throwing Luther out. I think a lot of these folks grow in their faith. You know, you have Revelation. He tried to reach them, and they rejected him, and so immediately he lashed out and began to call them all these names and thought they needed to be destroyed and killed. And I mean, this is the church's legacy that it has had, unfortunately, with the Jewish people. Thankfully, there is a huge segment that has realized that this isn't good, this isn't right. And you know, the evangelical church in America is one of the biggest supporters of the land of Israel and Jewish people. But let me talk about Israel real quick, the breakdown, because you were talking about why they were having a music festival there in the South. Mm-hmm. The reason is Israel is a very interesting country. Only 30% of the population are Orthodox or are practicing Jews. The rest are secular, or they are into New Age. There's a small segment. You want to talk about the most persecuted people group on the face of the earth? There is a small segment of Messianic Jews, and we call them Messianic Jews because they believe that Jesus is the Messiah. So the Jews are still waiting for their Messiah to show up. The Messianic Jews believe that their Messiah did show up and will show up again, as we do, the second coming. So the Messianic Jews are hated by the Jewish people in Israel. They are heavily persecuted by the Orthodox Jews. The Orthodox Jews, by and large, do not work. They have the government subsidizing them to study the Torah all day long. They are a huge political influence over there. So their laws are heavily influenced by the Orthodox Jews, but the vast majority of the country does not practice. So that would totally explain why they're out there partying. This is just a holiday for them. This isn't something. So this is, when you're over there, and I don't know how to explain this unless you've gone to Israel. We went on kind of a praying tour. We were praying for Israel. We were praying for the people. The sadness and the grief that rests on that land is almost overwhelming. At times, the spiritual atmosphere is very electric. It is very tense. It is very you'll have a lot of spiritual warfare, unlike anything you will experience anywhere in the world when you are in the nation of Israel. And it has a lot of deep-seated sexual sin. It is a very it has a lot of witchcraft, a lot of New Age. It is a spiritual place, good or bad. As much as the Lord looks on Israel and on Jerusalem, which he says he does, Satan is wanting to be right there. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna lay that out, and I'm gonna say one more thing. If you disagree with this and you're like, no, we've replaced the Jews. Do the Jews need to come to Christ in order to go to heaven? Absolutely. I believe that. I mean, we have all sinned. We've all fallen short. Absolutely. That veil that Paul says is on their eyes, it's going to come off. And when it does, they will begin to realize what's happened and who their Savior is. So take all that I've said biblically, if folks don't want to throw that out or they want to misinterpret it, and there is a whole line of thinking that is opposite of this. Okay, I get that. I have been dismayed by anyone who believes, and this is in, okay, so we're going to bring politics into this a little bit. I hate to say this because I have libertarian friends, but unfortunately, in the libertarian movement in America, there is a lot of anti-Semitism. And they believe, a lot of them believe, that all of these world events, all of them, are manipulated behind the scenes by bankers, which is code word for Jewish.
Oh, wow.
It really is. And,
Really?
Oh, yeah. So, Ron Paul gave a scathing anti-Israel, anti-Jewish speech on the floor of the House of Representatives way back when he was, he's a known anti-Semite. Do I disagree with him on economics? No, probably not at all. I mean, a lot of these folks I agree with. I have a big problem with anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I agree.
If you think this is all being manipulated, I mean, there are folks that do not believe what they see on television or what they see on the ground or anything because they said it's all a setup by Israel. These Jewish people are manipulating everything. It's a horrendous thing. So, okay, so throw all that out.
Yeah.
You're a Christian. You've got to take a look at what Satan is doing. If you can't see what God is doing, then look at what Satan is doing.
Yeah.
Who does he hate? Who do all the nations of the world gather against? Who do they want to wipe out with a viciousness we have never seen? It is the Jewish people.
Yeah.
If you look at history, you look at what happened with Moses, and Pharaoh decided that all of the male babies were getting thrown in the river during the generation that Moses would have come. It was Moses' generation. So Satan, I believe that's a satanic thing that moved Pharaoh's heart to do that, and that is an attempt to destroy a generation of deliverance. That's what Moses was. So we skip forward, and we see Satan doing the exact same thing again with Jesus.
Herod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sent in and killed all of the babies 2 years old and younger, his own people. Killed them because it was the age Jesus would have been at.
Yeah.
And I think even in a small picture, we've seen that with abortion here in America since 1973, 60-some million slaughtered. That is a very satanic thing. Yeah. Child sacrifice is a very satanic thing. Yeah. Killing the unborn child is satanic. Yeah. It is not. There's nothing good about it. There's nothing righteous about it. There's nothing that any Christian should be defending. And maybe God's got a purpose for my generation and your generation, and Satan knows that and was trying to wipe that out. And so now you see this happening again with the Jewish people. Why is Satan going after them so hard? And I believe it is because if the Jewish people come to know Jesus en masse, Paul says it will be riches for the world.
Yeah.
And so my prayer is absolutely God defend and protect Israel, but it is also take the veil off their eyes and let them know that they're loved. They're loved by their Christian brothers and sisters who love them and are praying for them, who want them back, grafted back, and that they're loved by their Father, their Heavenly Father.
That's right.
So,
I mean, Andrew, I want to be here for that day.
Yeah.
I want to be here that day.
Yeah.
When, because I know I've heard that there are rabbis in Israel right now, those Orthodox, that know Jesus is the Son of God, but they're afraid to come out.
Yeah.
They're waiting for a time.
Yeah.
Because of the persecution that they'll get from the Orthodox side.
Yeah.
But it just is going to take something to tip it. Yeah. And when it tips, we all need to hold on. Yeah. Because we're going to be a part of that. It's going to be awesome.
Yes.
And that's why I'll be honest, I want to be here for that.
Yeah.
I want to see generations changed.
Yeah.
And so
blank statements of, this is end times, and it's all in there, and blah, blah, blah. It is great to study biblical history and prophecy, absolutely. And we're always in end times. We're closer to the end now than we were yesterday, just because we are closer to the end.
And I'm older today than I was yesterday too. So,
but you are missing the point.
Yeah. If
your focus is on where does this fit in Revelation, instead of what is God doing now And
Yes.
what am I supposed to do to be a part of it?
That's right. 100%. There's nothing else to say.
Yeah, okay.
That's it,
We've
man.
nailed it.
That's it. Awesome. Well, I think that's enough for today.
Okay.
But
We should do this again sometime.
we should do this maybe a week from now or 2 weeks from now. Sounds good. Hey, thanks for watching. Thanks for staying with us through this whole episode. If you're here at this point, we are updating YouTube a little bit. We got Drew in the background doing some work for us. Super excited about that. And make sure you send us an email. Give us some encouragement or discouragement that we can talk about during the podcast.
Yeah.
The MC Squared Podcast at gmail.com is our Gmail. We also have an Instagram, and we probably need to set up a Facebook one of these days. But make sure you message us. Let us know. You can also send some messages through YouTube. We appreciate that. But we'll see you, and see you next time.
Yep, absolutely. See you guys.
See ya.
I got a fire in me. You're gonna set to burn.